very interesting, in-depth article in The Economist. China is thinking twice about lending to Africa. Starts off by talking about President Kenyatta, who supposedly went missing, saying that Beijing's largesse to Africa has sometimes seemed limitless. In September, China promised another $60 billion in aid and loans to the continent. Xi Jinping promised the money would come with no political strings attached. John Magufuli, Tanzania's strongman president, was delighted. The West, he griped, made its money dependent on strange conditions, such as insisting that Tanzania should not lock up gay men. China is a true friend, he enthused. Its assistance comes free of charge. In 2013, China agreed to finance and build a $10 billion port in Bagamoyo, once a big slave and ivory trading entrepot, but now a sleepy fishing village. My grandmother's sister lived there. She was murdered, actually. She was very well-to-do and she got murdered by the locals who thought that she was sitting on tons of gold. Kenya has not done even better. It was an early African member of Belt and Road Initiative, China's global infrastructure project. It scooped up at least $9.8 billion between 2006 and 2017, making it Africa's third largest recipient of Chinese loans. Beijing has already doled out $4.7 billion to finance its first two sections. An almost 500-kilometer stretch between the port of Mombasa and Nairobi is up and running. The second is nearly completed. Kenya had assumed that China would fork out the $3.5 billion needed for the penultimate section to Kisumu on Lake Victoria. If China's ultimate vision was a railway network connecting resource-rich inland states to Indian Ocean ports, why stop the funding of the project halfway through? This is a question we need answering. They point to the Chinese-financed port at Hambantota in Sri Lanka. After the project flopped commercially, a Chinese state-owned firm took control. Hambantota would be a handy place to park Chinese naval vessels seeking to patrol the Indian Ocean. The situation that Sri Lanka got itself into may not turn out to be unusual, says Mutula Kilonzo, a prominent Kenyan senator. It is going to happen to African countries too. The conditions of many loans are a debt trap. Nonetheless, African leaders are spooked. Dialogue with the Chinese was becoming edgier. On June 7th, Magufuli indefinitely suspended construction at Bagamoyo, balking at demands from the project's Chinese partner for a 99-year lease and a ban on port development elsewhere in Tanzania. Moving smoothly from cheerleader to critic, he accused the firm of setting tough conditions that can only be accepted by mad people. Last year, Sierra Leone scrapped a Chinese-funded project to build a new international airport for fear that it would involve too much debt. The perception of a plot to turn the Indian Ocean into a Chinese lake endangers the political capital China has amassed in Africa. Since Mr. Kenyatta came to power in 2013, public debt has nearly tripled. Last year, the IMF raised the country's risk of debt distress from low to moderate. If Kenya defaults, China's risks being blamed. A railway between Djibouti and Addis Ababa, completed in 2017, cost China's state-owned insurer Sinosure $1 billion in losses, its chief economist said last year. Corruption and mismanagement drive up costs. Sometimes plans smack of unreasonable optimism. Bagamoyo's port was expected to handle more containers than Rotterdam, Europe's biggest freight terminal. Kenya's railways had its critics from the outset. Corruption made it a ludicrously expensive venture, costing twice the international average per kilometer of track. When Mr. Kenyatta and his delegation arrived in Beijing in May, they were treated to an unfamiliar experience, according to a presidential advisor. The Kenyans were questioned not only about their sums, but about corruption. Mr. Kenyatta was asked how he would afford a consensus and a referendum on constitutional change. The Chinese even wanted to know if he planned to stand for office again. He is obliged to stand down in 2022. It was like talking to the World Bank, grumbled another aide. 18th of June last year, I said, so the first overarching point is that creditors are not Santa Claus, and miscues will exact a very heavy price. Countries will be hambantoted. September 2018, on the occasion of FOCAC, I said there has been a substantive linguistic recasting of China-Africa by Xi Jinping. The end of vanity is one example. I participated in an Al Jazeera Inside Stories, Africa getting into a debt trap with China. Have a listen. That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups.